So if you're new to this idea, I mean, you heard me say the five Buddha families, and that can be like what? What do you mean families? I thought there was one Buddha. This is a question that some of you asked some time ago, and rightfully so. And one of the things that is hopefully helpful to think about is how each of these, what we call Buddha families or wisdom Buddhas, really just simply represents a different aspect of enlightened awareness as it has been transformed from what we might call neurotic consciousness forms or the five poisons. So we're really talking about embodiments here of different, very subtle states of awareness, each of which have their own particular nature on that continuum of waking up, yeah, of self-realization. And in that case, each of these are sort of a different, very subtle dimension of what we call Dharmakaya, or this kind of wisdom body that is made up of the consciousness of awakening as brought to us through the Buddha's teachings. So don't worry if you're like, I've got to keep track of all of these Buddhas and their consorts, and then their families, and their dakinis, and their bodhisattvas, and their wrathful forms. You don't have to. But just knowing, I think it's more important to know what are they speaking to within us. After all, we all carry these different aspects of these awarenesses, if you will. If we can say there's more than one awareness, we're talking about qualities of awareness. Um, so we're here on the very last one with the Buddha Amoghasiddhi. Amoghasiddhi is the one where sort of the first four Buddha families actually yields a very tangible fruit within the world. Yeah? That Amoghasiddhi is really the sort of presiding over the family of karma, this term karma. And karma is here seen to be not just sort of you reap what you sow, but it's here seen to be an opportunity. So, of course, karma, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, there are five personalities or types of people, if you will, who represent these five Buddha families. And so Amoghasiddhi, it has a very interesting personality type. If anybody's done the Enneagram, I'm curious how these would stack up against the various. Anyway, that's just a side tangent. I'm going to show you a picture here or a slide rather, of these five Buddha families. So this is another image that my friend and housemate Darren actually found and had sent to me. And I thought, hey, this is another, probably even better than the picture that I showed you before. And here you can see the five Buddha families. This is a very typical arrangement, if you will, of these different Buddhas. And here in the middle, we have the Buddha Vajrayana. And he is seen, just as a quick refresher, he is seen to be the primordial Buddha, or rather we might call that primordial awareness, that very subtle form of brilliant, crystal clear, primordial, pristine awareness that is basically the source of things, right? The source of all things, the Dharma Dhatu, the field of existing matter and beings and such. And he is kind of like the one that lays the foundation for the ones that follow. And so this is a reflection of our own awareness, of the source of our own consciousness. And then we move down to the bottom one. The blue one is Akshobhya, the Buddha Akshobhya. And actually, Vairochana, his consort was Akashadatishvari, which aside from being a mouthful to say, means she is the womb of infinite space. And so she's the one who allows brightness of Vajrayana to basically pervade in an unobstructed way throughout the cosmos. And then we come down here to the Buddha Akshobhya. And the Buddha Akshobhya is that aspect of awareness that is also pristine and clear, like a mirror. And he is what we would call the mirror mind, that here, as awareness is somewhat more tangibly experienced, perhaps, that that awareness is like, or our mind rather, is like a mirror and reflects forms. It reflects the world that we see outside of us. So it has this very clear reflective capacity, and yet the mirror itself is not the reflections. And his consort is Lochana. Lochana, she is basically the wisdom aspect that helps us transform a mind perhaps steeped in anger or resentment into the power of seeing clearly the nature of this mirror mind. And that becomes important later as we look at how Akshobhya helps us to have wise action, to perform actions that are in service of wisdom and not suffering. And then we move to the left. On the left side, we have Ratnasambhava, the Buddha Ratnasambhava, who is basically the Buddha of equanimity, or that aspect of awareness that is sees sameness. Yeah, it doesn't have preference over one experience or another. Ratnasambhava doesn't, that aspect of awareness anyway, doesn't prefer one thought over another, but sees all things as pretty much equal, just manifestations. So his consort here is Mamaki. And Mamaki basically, again, is that wisdom principle. So the female, the divine feminine principle here is the wisdom component that then through which, or from which rather, the male principle can act skillfully and with wisdom. Without her, he would not know what to do. He would largely be incapacitated. And then we move up to the top. We have Amitabha Buddha, the red one, and his consort is Pandaravasini, and their element is fire. So Pandara or Pandaravasini is basically a purified form of passion, of inspiration, and discriminative, discerning awareness. So here, after we have been able to recognize the equanimity and the sameness, or this kind of unified nature of Ratnasambhava, here we are now clear enough to discern the distinctions between things. We're able to see the nature with penetrative awareness, how things are rather distinct from each other, but without the filters of our afflictions. Yeah. And so finally here, we arrive at Amoghasiddhi. And Amoghasiddhi is the fifth, and here is a picture. Are you seeing Amoghasiddhi now? The next slide. Yes? Okay. Thank you, Clarice. Here he has a gesture. His right hand is in the gesture of no fear. And one of the things that Amoghasiddhi is there to teach us, basically, is the quality of fearlessness. And here it's fearlessness in doing the right thing. Yeah, fearlessness in despite the presence of the three poisons or the unwholesome roots, the afflictions, that we can sort of stand with conviction and with proper motivation to do the right thing, regardless of who is around us or who is sort of talking us out of doing something that is wholesome. And Amoghasiddhi's consort is our very beloved and representation of the divine feminine, Green Tara, who we have talked about before. And it's interesting that Green Tara is kind of in the mythology of Tibetan Buddhism. She is a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of great, profound compassion. And part of it is that this Avalokiteshvara in China, often she is seen as in the form of Kuan Yin, uh, is the one that sort of feels our pain, that is there as a protector. Avalokiteshvara, when we are in pain, actually sheds tears in the presence of our suffering. So he has such deep empathy and such a feeling sense for our suffering that he himself is moved to tears. And out of his right eye comes green Tara as the protector, as the refuge for how we feel, for our when we are suffering, when we encounter suffering. And she is also seen to be a protector. And then out of his left eye, out of Avalokiteshvara's left eye, comes white Tara. And white Tara is that aspect of compassion that has wisdom, guidance, and well-being. And I often like to talk about white Tara as the bodhisattva of resilience, which is cool. I teach a whole course at Harvard Extension School on resilience, and anyway, I think of her as being that embodiment. So green Tara here, in this role as the consort to Buddha Akshobhya, she has an interesting role. Last week we had or actually I think it was 2 weeks ago when we met last, we had a really kind of in-depth conversation about the divine female principle. I'm still being moved by that conversation that we had. I think it was very profound, and we had some people sharing very real-time, earthly forms of struggle. And I'm hoping for them it was helpful to have our community here as a refuge for that. Now, Amoghasiddhi, he is basically, the name Amoghasiddhi means literally unfailing accomplishment. In other words, what he does is successful because of the wisdom green Tara brings of skillful means, of what is the right medicine for the right situation. Tara literally means liberation, or the mother of liberation. And there are 21 forms of Tara. We don't have to worry about that. But in the green manifestation, green Tara is also, the green color represents growth. Yeah, it represents opportunity. And this aspect of protection that she brings us through her, just like a mother kind of sort of welcoming us in, nurturing us when we're suffering. So here, what we're looking at is what we might call wisdom energies. And this compound term, wisdom energy, as I just mentioned, wisdom is seen to be the feminine principle. And we all have both male and female principles within us. This is not meant to be gendered specifically. And the other message here is that they're not meant to be made into an etheric concept by which we don't actually live and apply in our daily lives. And this is one of the pitfalls that often happens when we in the apotheosis, if you will, of a being or of a particular quality that is specific to a gender. It's not to just say, this is etheric, this is all great, but in practice, then I do this. But it's really to reconcile the wisdom of action and the principles that we're working with here. And so this is our challenge here with these Buddha families. The element of Amoghasiddhi is wind or air. And so in this case, it's often talked about, Amoghasiddhi is often talked about as relying on our senses. So if you're walking in a windstorm or where there's a breeze, you can actually get in touch with the energy of Amoghasiddhi through the skin, by feeling the sense of wind or air on the skin. You can do this if you're sitting in meditation and just sort of touch into the senses. And actually, it's all the senses around the quality of air. So, like right now, I have incense burning behind me here with my friend behind me, and that is a quality, a fragrance of the air that is around me, as well as the ingredients of aloes wood, which is the kind of incense that I'm burning. There's a lovely sort of purifying quality to it. Let's see. Let's look for a moment here, and I want to also give a shout out to this book that I've been working with, A Wisdom Rising by Lama Tsultrim Alioni, Wisdom Rising. And she does such a great job of going into these 5 wisdom families, primarily focusing on the empowered feminine. So the title of the book is Wisdom Rising, Journey into the Mandala of the Empowered Feminine. And it's really focused on these 5 Buddha families. Actually, and I'll read to you, let's see, I'm going to read you this passage here. And this is how she describes this 5th Buddha family in terms of karma. So here is what Lama Alioni says about this 5th family. She says, if we go through the sequence of the Buddha families, karma is the last. The enlightened activity as a result of all the other families. In Buddha family, there is spaciousness. And she's referring here to Vajrayana, the first one. In Vajra, that is Akshobhya, we develop intellectual precision. This is the reflection of the mirror mind. In Ratna, or Ratna Sambhava, the jewel family, we cultivate generosity, enrichment, and stability of equanimity. In Padma family, the lotus family of Amitabha and Pandaravasini, we learn wise discernment. And then finally, in the Karma family of Akshobhya and Green Torah, we have accomplishment. The wisdom here is a sense of self-existing energy, where there is automatic fulfillment rather than imposing oneself on a result, which is actually often the fastest way to get something done, meaning we don't overthink it or over-control it. Yeah? The already accomplished aspect of the karma family's all-accomplishing wisdom is the sense that whatever you are stressing about, you can actually relax and trust that it is already done. This isn't a matter of not planning or getting well. This isn't a matter of not planning or getting well organized or taking proper steps to do something, but rather it is an inner freedom and a real relaxation that is fully present. So there's a distinction here. Yeah, she's not saying that we simply don't have to attend to business, yeah? But it's the spirit with which we accomplish things. And she goes on to talk about the personality that is affiliated with the karma family of Akshobhya and Green Torah. And so here are some traits. Maybe you'll see some of yourself in some of these things. I know that I can see myself in some of these traits. But the personality that goes with the medicine of this 5th Buddha family. Number 1, people who are really impulsive. Okay, that's not really me, but not yet. People who are really eager to jump to the end. So maybe it could be like reading a book. Has anybody read the last chapter first and then gone back and go, yeah, if it's interesting, I'll read the rest, or jump to the end. But largely it is a sort of a fixation on the outcome rather than allowing things to unfold naturally. One who is controlling of others, of situations, and who exhibits a fear of losing control. Now, who doesn't have this one, at least to some degree, right? Um, but I think part of what we're maybe starting to see here are those of us that are type A personalities in whatever we do. Um, People who are ahead of themselves. So if you're constantly ahead and you're not really present because you're focusing on the future or on outcome, that momentum is going to be pushing you forward. And as a result, you might be doing things really fast and in an unmindful way. You may drive really fast. She says, being speedy and forceful. These are terms she uses. And as well as being territorial.
Mm.
Um, People who fit this personality often have difficulty simply in being because all they want to be doing is doing. It's really the doing, but to stop and find a sense of flow that is uncontrived, non-striving and non-trying, it can be very difficult. So this is the sort of the wisdom of Amoghasiddhi and Green Tara. And momentum is the key to this. So if we look at how consciousness works, how consciousness unfolds in the nature, in the direction of the tendency that that consciousness has. For example, let's say I've never had chocolate before, and I have maybe a mild curiosity to try chocolate, and I take a piece of chocolate and I like it very much. And now all the five aggregates are activated: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness itself. The next time I want more chocolate. Yeah. And the more I feed the chocolate, that consciousness that is basically in line with enjoying chocolate will continue to snowball. This is why it matters where we put our intentions. It matters if we succumb to habits that aren't good for us. Well, it's natural. Consciousness unfolds in that direction. We can see that with maybe bacteria, with illnesses, that viruses and such, that these are things that are just seeking a fulfillment in the direction of their nature. And so our thoughts are the same. And as are our imprints, our tendencies, what we might call our karmic patterns. So if we're giving in to impulsivity constantly, we may even revel in it, yeah, then it becomes even more habitual, even more automatic. And so the medicine here is first become aware of the momentum behind you, behind your action. Does that make sense? And know, okay, I've got all this energy impelling me towards the outcome. But what direction is it going, and what is the motivation here for this direction? And so, in a way, what Lama Tsultrim Alioni tells us is that cultivating a form of renunciation is part of this Buddha family. And I'm not saying that she's saying that we need to basically just cast off all the shackles of living in the world, and if you own a home, sell your house, sell your car, just basically become a wandering mendicant. This is not what she's saying. Because for those of us who are not monastics, renunciation has a slightly different meaning. It really is looking more at renunciating, uh, letting go of the things that do not serve us where we are on the path in this moment. I'll say that again. Renunciation is the process of letting go of that which does not serve us on the path for things to be accomplished that we want to see in our lives. I mean, imagine, whether you want to be successful at a business or, you have some goal in mind. How much baggage are we bringing onto the path from our histories that get in the way? And so here, the renunciation is looking at what doesn't serve our best interests. And of course, it's easier said than done, especially if we have a history of trauma or other things that are just sort of feel as if they are intractable imprints in our awareness. That doesn't mean we have to be held back. Yeah, we're not helpless to these things, but rather we can metabolize, integrate them through good, what Judith Herman would call recovery, from a trauma, reconnecting, integrating, and still being able to flourish. So renunciation doesn't require that we don't have these wounded places, as Shantideva tells us in the Bodhisattva way of life, this woundedness that comes with the mind. But rather it's being freed from the mud. This is at least how I wrote this down, the mud of the fetters, the poisons. By renunciating these things intentionally, consciously, by cultivating a practice with the right motivation, allows for clarity. When we let go of certain things, clarity then can arise. It has space in which to arise. And I once I once emptied out a closet at home. I had all these old clothes hanging in there for years. I never wore them. I didn't really like them, but I was hanging on to them. And one day I just decided to just get rid of all of them and donate them and everything. And it was like, wow, there's hardly anything left in here. I need to go shopping, right? But I didn't. And sure enough, I had a family member who decided that they wanted to buy me a bunch of new clothes. At the time, I was a student, so it's not like I could just go out and spend a couple of $1,000s on clothes. At least not the places where I would have wanted to shop. Um, and so, anyway, that space that was created in that closet actually got filled with more things that were more descriptive of who I was at the time, which at that point was moving into doing chaplaincy work in a hospital, needing sport jackets and ties, the things that you need for that kind of environment, not just sitting in a meditation cushion somewhere. So anyway, the point is that by clearing out the old, just reflecting on what needs to happen there, and that is a form of renunciation, at least for those of us who are lay practitioners. The clarity then allows for discernment. So here we're talking about the last Buddha family of Amitabha Buddha and Pandaravasini. These are qualities of awareness that have the capacity to discriminate between things. Yeah. We see the distinction between things, and we can actually see perhaps more clearly the nature of what is there before us. And in that case, the third piece is right effort, which is action that is more informed, it's more skillful. And we're able to take that discerning quality that is no longer fettered and obfuscated by the filters of our clinging, our desires, and the poisons, but to see it with the equanimity of Ratmasambhava, the discriminative awareness, the permeating consciousness that helps us see things more clearly, and then the action of Amoghasiddhi and Green Tara that help us to act skillfully. Let's see. The last thing I'll say for now is, interestingly, we have in Buddhism this notion of two kinds of realities or truths. One is that of relative truth or conventional. The conventional being the forms, the concepts, the images, the relative phenomenal world that we live in and work with. And these can be entrapments, but they can also be used skillfully for wisdom, for practice. When we are able to transmute the awareness of the consciousness aspects of suffering into wisdom. And it's Amoghasiddhi who basically represents conventional wisdom and the use, basically the utilitarianism of the relative world. Whereas Green Tara reflects the wisdom of the ultimate reality, this other form. So there's conventional and ultimate reality. And so she is that being that brings the view that is never far from this view of the totality. You know, we don't get narrow, we don't get so focused in and narrow in our view because this more spacious and vast view of our lives is always there to put things into perspective. So by seeing the nature of things within ultimate reality that is provided by Green Torah, our response is determined. Our response basically, or our action, is imbued with that right effort, with that wisdom that otherwise may be aimless or may be impacted by the unwholesome roots. So I hope I'm not confusing everything for you all, and I'm recognizing the blessing we have that Tajay just popped up. He does that sometimes. Hey, Tajay. So anyway, I thought that was kind of also an interesting notion. And when we're looking at this kind of mythology or this cosmology of the Buddha families, but really what these are trying to do is lead us to seeing how one thing connects to the next. And remembering that these aren't necessarily easy things that we can just kind of decide to do, but they are qualities of an awareness that is more refined. They are qualities of enlightenment when we're able to transmute the energy that we put into the afflictions and put them towards the right understanding that is the first of the Eightfold Path.